Boom. Another episode of the Thunderstock Show, which is a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. This season, all season, is about the EOS journey and speaking with people who just don't just talk the talk, but they walk the walk. Today, a very special guest, City of Angels, LA, born and raised, Michael Richman. Michael, can't wait to dig in. First question I have for you is, what was it like growing up in Los Angeles? It's a unique area of the world, that's for sure.
It is a unique area of the world. I was thinking about this the other day. I have two small kids, and I think growing up in LA is different than growing up probably anywhere else in the country because you're surrounded by people that are doing such amazing things. I mean, I went to high school and was friendly with the guy who founded Tinder. And yeah, I mean, right?
What?
Crazy. And I mean, how many people can say that, right? Or my daughter's in class with one of the drummers from the kids of a drummer from a famous music band, and it's just like we're listening on the radio the other day, and I said to my daughter, "Oh, that's your friend's dad." I mean, so how many times, can you say that in a lot of different places? So it's really an interesting place to grow up. It really gives you a big network and is an interesting conglomeration of people, I would say.
Yeah, there's probably not a lack of visionaries. I just use some EOX speak in terms of LA. I feel like people with a dream that has to deal with certain things. It's really important to put yourself in the right environment. It sounds like you've seen that firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I even went to college here, so I really haven't lived anywhere else my entire life.
Don't know if you're a football fan, but you might be a Reggie Bush fan.
I was in class with Reggie Bush. How about that?
You know what? Hearing other stories, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I was in class with Reggie Bush. We were at USC at the same time. Me, him, Lindell White. So yeah, we were in a presidential history class together.
That is cool. So, speaking of environments and how they're important and how you're shaped, you're now a fourth generation entrepreneur.
Yeah.
All right. So, to say the question on the people analyzer, if you get it, if it's in your DA, silly thing. That's just, it seems like it's obvious. But what about being a fourth generation entrepreneur? Do you think is different than maybe some other people that you've interacted with, or maybe that weren't entrepreneurs that you're like, oh, my background makes sense or whatnot? Like, what was it like growing up knowing that your family for almost 100 years or whatnot has been entrepreneurs?
I think there's a certain scrappiness that you learn when you grow up in a family full of entrepreneurs. So, I go back to here's a great example. When I was applying to college, my SAT scores were not the greatest SAT scores in the world. But my father said to me, if you want to get into college and you want to do this so badly, then you have to find another way in. And so he taught me, hey, you got to market yourself. And so I had 30 letters of recommendation from teachers and bosses at the restaurant that I worked at and everything. And each day I sent one to the admissions person. So there was a constant steady flow of these letters of recommendation coming into her saying why I was the right person for this school. And so I realized that I had to make up for my deficiencies. And so it was that scrappiness of like, well, you might not be the top academic performer, but you're going to utilize the skills and the tools that you have in order to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah, talk about consistency. Doing that every day. I mean, that is something that some people never learn, or they learn much later in their career. And you got that before you entered college. What did you want to study when you were in school?
I studied communication.
Makes sense. Yeah, you had a.
Communications is the foundation. People talk about, well, what do you want to major? What should you major in if you want to be an entrepreneur? And the answer is you can major in a lot of different things if you want to be an entrepreneur because, it depends on what path you want to take into your entrepreneurial journey. But for me, communications is so important because you have to communicate with your employees, you have to communicate with vendors, you have to communicate with customers. There's so many people that you have to communicate with. And in EOS, we talk about simplifying and communicating in a simple manner. It's so important, and people are not great communicators nowadays. And so being able to communicate in a way that is effective to all of these different audiences is something that I think is is not matchable in a lot of different majors.
Yeah, I mean, you had a couple points that I want to double click on that were really interesting. Number one, I think college, maybe now more than ever, people think that you need to have your high school track and you do one thing and commit to it in school, and they're really pushing for like specialized niche majors, which for some people awesome. If you know that you want to be an entrepreneur, I like the idea, like you said, of communication because it's a universal skill. It can be applied to anything. I like the liberal arts model where it's like they teach you how to like how to think, not necessarily what to think or what to do, but like how to learn. And with communication, like you said, especially now in the age of what we're doing right now, interfacing on a screen, is sometimes too much communication. I know people that are maybe Gen Alpha that will like not answer the phone and they'll like just text me like no matter what. I found that weird growing up in a time where like we didn't have that option. Or it was T9 texting. It was just kind
Right.
of like I feel like that era of seeing the ropes of entrepreneurship with your family business. And what did your father? What was his journey like? And your grand and your
My great grandfather started our family business. His first actual business as an entrepreneur was a pool hall in New York City in the 1920s. And my great grandmother worked in the pool hall with him. And the story goes that there was some tiff inside the pool hall between some gangsters, and they said that they were going to shoot up the pool hall. And my great grandmother said, "Well, we're going to get into a different business. I'm not going to be risking my life all the time." So he went to his cousin. Are you familiar with the gangster Meyer Lansky?
heard the name?
Okay, so he's a pretty famous gangster, and he is a distant cousin of my great grandfather's. And my great grandfather said to him, "Okay, well, we're not doing this pool hall anymore. What kind of business do you think I should get into?" And this was right at the beginning of Prohibition. And my great grandfather was told, "Well, why don't you get into milk distribution? And you could legitimately distribute milk, but also take these canisters and fill them with alcohol and deliver them to speakeasies around New York City." And so that was the business that my great grandfather was kind of put into, which was delivering milk throughout the Bronx and parts of New York City during the 90s. And my family, through I think another two generations, owned that milk distribution business. Obviously, after Prohibition ended, it was just a legitimate milk business, delivering to commercial restaurants, bodegas, school, prisons, things like that. And we owned it up until the mid 1990s. And so that was my
Whoa,
yeah. So that was
that's nuts.
yeah, that was my family. I'm the first generation in four that never drove a milk truck, and I can tell you, I don't think I could drive a milk truck.
I don't mean to laugh. If I do, it's laughing with you. People talk about in the space of business education that business isn't life or death. And it kind of was for a period for your family business. That's wild. Talk
Uh,
about grit.
yeah,
Good gosh.
and it became an extremely successful business and supported a lot of people, a lot of cousins, a lot of uncles and aunts and people like that through years and years and years. So it's one of those family stories where you go, wow, this is something that has changed generations, this business. And I saw that growing up. I saw that, the business sent me to college, for instance, through profits. When you look at something like that and you say, wow, this is a real way to change not only your future, but your generation and
Right.
generation's future. It's a pretty cool experience.
So then how did you said that business was from the 20s, 30s to the 90s.
Right.
What took you the whole other side of the continent onto the West
My
Coast, your
family.
family?
So my father wanted to start and own his own business, and so prior to me being born, he moved out here to California, and with my mom, and I was born. My father was working for Fortune 500 companies, and he realized that that wasn't the life that he wanted, and he really wanted to start his own business. It just wasn't. And there wasn't enough freedom in what he was doing. And so he put the word out, I guess one of the original searchers, if you will, and he put the word out that he wanted to buy a business. And he talked to an accountant, and the accountant said, "Hey, I have these partners or these clients, excuse me, these clients that own a tent business, commercial tents. They made tents for Academy Awards, tents for big events and things of that nature."
Not
And
just your roadside fireworks stand. You're
right,
talking
exactly.
big tents.
Big tents. and they had this struggling awning division. And they said they were either going to shut the awning division down or they were going to bring a partner on. And so that partner became my father, and he went in there with, I believe, about 3 or 4 employees in the early 90s and started running this awning company. And that's I mean, later in my story, that's the business that I ended up purchasing 50% from his partners from, and him and I became partners, 50-50 partners. And that's where we used EOS and got introduced to it and grew it and ended up selling it and having a pretty successful exit a couple years ago.
I, you know what? That's such a. There's so many ways I can take this, but one that's really near and dear is joining the family business and just and making it um, putting your own brand on it, bringing in the EOS, becoming a 50% partner, and then helping to achieve the financial freedom for your parents. I think that is such a cool story because a lot of people that I've bumped into maybe have had entrepreneurial parents, but then they just want to rebel against that. Whether it's the urge to do their completely own separate different thing or to start their own business to prove themselves. But it's rare to me to see that generational community or what do you want? I guess cooperation really succeed and flourish. What are some of the obviously EOS being a component, but what are some of the key factors to how you made that dynamic work?
Well, first off, interestingly enough, I never thought that I was going to join the family business. And so I was a commercial banker, and I started to see how businesses made money, didn't make money. And I said, I want to own a business. And I went out and I started looking as, again, they didn't have that term then, searcher. I was looking for, are you familiar with that term, searcher? People who search to buy businesses?
I was one.
Oh, okay, you were one. Okay, so you
Yeah,
understand. So
I get it.
I was one of the early searchers before there was websites for searchers and things like that. And I started looking around for a business to buy. And I was actually in escrow to buy a business. And I was driving over with a check because back then you had checks and you weren't ACHing stuff. And I get a call from the gentleman and he said, "Well, I changed my mind. I don't want to retire." And I said, "What? I was buying this business from you." And he says, "Yeah, but you haven't turned the check in yet, so we're not doing this business." And so I said, "Okay." And so that was
Whoa.
like, okay, what am I going to do next? And so I obviously told my father, and he said to me, "Well, why have you never considered joining me in this business?" And I said, "Look, one of the requirements is I want to be at least a 50% owner of the business, and that's important to me. I don't want to have to feel like I'm 4951 and taking
Right.
orders from somebody."
Minority.
Minority. And he said, "Well, why don't you make an offer to my partners that were silent partners at the time and see if they're interested in selling?" And that's what I did.
That is. There's a couple things. One, I can relate to a little bit of the story with generational entrepreneurship. The thriving metropolis of Applington, Iowa.
Oh,
I
okay.
say that in jest, right? Not a metropolis at all. Is where my grandfather was from, and he ended up years down the road. I'll skip to the part between the U.S. military and what was at the time Bell Atlantic. Decided when he was done with his military after 27 years and some plane crashes and like 16 moves and 14 years, that kind of thing, to get into the family business. We had an Easter egg dye company.
Whoa, that's nichey.
The first Easter egg dye company, I don't know if it was the world, but North America, and helped to turn that around. Then he got the itch, and then yada yada down. Then he started doing commercial real estate, which by the nature, whenever you have to eat what you kill, or if you don't sell, you starve, kind of thing. I think it's entrepreneurial, but then got his all the licenses to start up his own shop. And I grew up with he and my father being partners and co-brokers, and I got to see that, and it was really really cool to see the family business grow. But I love the dynamic that you had where it was like the negotiation was like perfect. You went from one where borderline lawsuit territory where someone's just like, "Oh, check didn't clear," which depending on the contract whatnot. But the thing that they always told me is don't count your money till it hits your bank account,
That's true. It's
right?
100% true.
So what are some of the lessons you learned from that one particular about your first biz buying experience that maybe didn't go your way but ended up being a blessing?
Yeah, I think it's important to just, like you said, not count your chickens until they're hatched. Until somebody signs on the dotted line and the check's in their account, it's not, it hasn't happened yet. And honestly, those lessons when I sold my business on the other end were something that we definitely thought about a lot. And so, for instance, nobody on our staff knew that we were selling the business until I think 4 days before we sold it, 3 days before we sold it, because we didn't want to have, should the deal have fallen through, we didn't want to have a situation where people, were running for the doors or running for the hills or anything like that. So we really played that close to the vest. And I think having a deal like the deal we had kind of fall through allowed me to see that the better way to do this is to keep everything really, really tight.
I mean, I've seen the alternative. So when I bought my first business, similar thing. It was kind of cat out of the bag. Like a year before, it took a lot longer to buy the business than we thought. Had the first meeting April of 2020 and closed June of 21. Right, so over a
Right.
year to buy.
COVID.
Yeah, COVID was wild, and that was part of the weirdness too, because of all the payroll protection program and things like that. But looking back, I kind of wish I would have learned what you had learned when you sold. That it's like probably keep it close to the chest, both sides, like, and then when it happens, because there were some things that happened where people thought where they were clock watching. All right, when's it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And I'm just like, well, it's my first time. It'll happen when it happens. I sure think it will. And one of those lessons that doesn't apply just to buying businesses, but to any project that you're willing to do. It's like, don't count on it until it's over. One of the reasons I do not engage in gambling, right? I have a very low risk tolerance for that.
This
Yeah,
part. Right.
that's fun. So, okay, you then sold the family business, and I did want to make a mention that although you didn't drive milk, you did serve top brands like Panda Express, Four Seasons. That stayed consistent.
Yes, that is true. My father and I sold the business again 3 years ago, and we did have some of the top brands, which is pretty neat. So when he bought the business, it was solely an awning company, and the business really grew to not do, when people hear awning company, they think of the little awning over the back porch at your house, and we really changed that. We didn't do any residential, and we only did commercial, and we would do big nationwide brands. So we did all the Starbucks in Florida, all the Starbucks in California, all the Starbucks in Alabama, Hawaii, every Panda Express nationwide, every Dave and Buster's nationwide. So some really big name brands. And then we also differentiated ourselves because we started selling poolside cabanas and ones that
Hmm.
go at the Four Seasons resorts, Ritz Carltons, some of the big resorts, all of the, what's the name of the water parks? Now it's escaping me, but a lot of water parks across the US. And so the cabanas was a way for us to differentiate ourselves from other awning companies and really have a product that was something that people could make money off of immediately, which was really great. So we would sell poolside cabanas. We were into, for instance, the Disney Resort Hotel in Honolulu, and I was just there a few weeks ago, and they still have our cabanas there, and they're still renting them for $750 a day. So you want to talk about something that's making money constantly as like an ATM and paying off. You have something like that
A day,
a day. Yeah.
Michael. I have to pick my jaw up off the ground. Partially because I have this frame of reference, recency bias. My wife and I were fortunate enough to go to a Secrets resort in
Okay.
Cancun. We
Yeah.
just got back yesterday,
Oh,
and
okay.
one of the things I said to her, two things was, "This is the most beautiful awning I have ever seen in my life at this resort." I'm like, the architecture, like the person who did this must have cost a fortune in and of itself. Obviously, being from where I'm from, Pennsylvania, lots of awning companies, none with that type of aesthetic and more the Amish, fine. And number two, I'm like, there's how many poolside cabanas here? And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then that could have been technically one of your clients.
Could have been, yeah. And
Like,
those may have been our cabanas. I don't know. But yeah, having products at places like that changed the trajectory of our business.
oh my gosh. Another thing I want to point out with that story, Michael, it's like super important for anyone listening, especially for me to remember. So I'm going to say it. It's almost easier to succeed when you shoot for the moon versus just like the residential, the grind, that maybe oversaturated local competitive marketplace, which a lot of people that, for better or worse, like it's kind of small thinking. But when you're like, we're going to go for the top brands and get all of the state and all of their locations, you just kind of hit a home run that is more of an outsized return than just baseball. I know you're a baseball fan,
Right.
but the maximum runs you can get in a home run are four, but you can get four states versus
No,
four houses.
yeah, and you're not dealing, what we learned was you do a residential job and Mrs. Jones is out there going, well, is that the right color brown? I think it's the right color brown. And it's like you do a large chain and they go, okay, this is the red that we're going to Panda Express. This is the red that we're going to use on every awning in every city across the US, period. So we don't have to have that conversation every time we put a unit up going, is that the right brown? I think it's the right one. It takes a lot of the second guessing out of it.
You're solving a monetary financial problem as well when you do that B2B
Right.
versus, I mean, I have obviously a background in real estate through the family business, but I asked my dad one time, I was like, why don't you ever do houses? You're always doing, commercial, industrial. And he goes, well, Ross, it's really simple. I don't have the time, patience, emotional intelligence to deal with what color should this wall be post purchase and all the matters of fancy. He goes, when we're doing commercial, it's business. It's like, does this save us money? Will there be room to grow? And it's more of I don't say logical versus emotional decision, but in many ways it is approached that way. And I love that you have that background in banking. That probably helped you with like how to view business, I guess, from a high level. It's just my guess.
Yeah, and you take the emotion, yeah, and again, you take the emotion out of it. It's a business decision. I would say to clients when I was selling them cabanas, how much can you rent this cabana for? "Okay, I could rent it for $700 a day. Well, how many days is it going to take for you to pay this cabana back? It was almost like a no-brainer for them.
Yeah, I think it's just talking about. So you have a background in marketing, you understand finance from your background in the banking. You had to do marketing, get into college, but sales, I think, is one of the most important and closely tied to leadership functions in a business. But what you just said was powerful. It was powerful. I want to dive in. It's like you're helping someone to make a decision, and you just did it in like two sentences versus trying to persuade someone, change their mind, appeal to this, that. It's not like a closing tactic. It's like, okay, what's the input? All right, this much money. How long until you break even? Okay, so slide the paper. There you go.
Right.
That's
You're solving consultative sales to me is you're solving a problem for them. You're solving a
right.
problem. And that's what it's about, and that's what we built our business on. We're solving a problem for you. We're helping you to grow your pool area's finances. We're helping you to have a resort that makes more money. We're helping you all of these things.
Well, moving on from the pool. Now that I'm back from the
Well, now
resort,
that you're back from Cancun, yeah.
now that we're back from Cancun, I need to get my head out of Cancun because trust me, it's easy to get lost there. What are some of the examples where business ownership wasn't as slam dunk, smooth sailing, right? Where, you know, we talked about one tough one, but what are some other of the choppy waters, the trials and tribulations you've had?
Look, it's always people. I think it's always people and having the right people in the right seats. Our business was a people heavy business. It was making custom products for some high end resorts and having people understand the aesthetic value that a Secrets resort or a Four Seasons requires was difficult for us. And so I would say that making sure that you have the right people in the right seats that are constantly doing the things that you want them to do in the way that you want them to do it is probably some of the difficulties in business.
I think it always comes down to people, really. Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I think that just like growth and you experienced when you did that strategy of not only deploying EOS but going after the B2B versus the residential, I think people are equally as exponential. Where there's, I forget the quote, and you probably have heard of it before, but it's like however many members of an organization, it's like the square root of that number. So if it's 110 people, do 50% of the productive output. And it's like, how do you get more? There's another analogy on the same line. It's like, how do you get more cannons versus ammunition,
Right.
right? because if all you have is ammunition but nowhere to fire it, it's just like latent kind of worthless potential. And it's much more rare to find somebody that's a cannon than ammunition, but that striking that balance. So, how do you approach now that you're in the EOS implementer role and you're more consultative, helping businesses unlock the people element?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is utilizing the core values, right? And figuring out what are the core values of the person that we are hiring. And I really suggest that's something that I don't know if every EOS implementer recommends, but I recommend it, is you talking about the core values on the interview, having the conversation about, hey, this is what we believe in at our company. And do you believe in this as well? And give me some examples of when you've seen this core value come into light. I think can be really, really an effective way to make sure that businesses are hiring people that believe the same things that they do, because that's half the battle. That's half the battle, is having somebody in there who shares your core values.
What are, if you could think back on the four generations of business, some similarities in core values that you might have shared with your grandfather or great
I
grandparents?
think I think it's taking care of the customer. That was one of our core values, is we would do anything. I think we phrased it at the awning and cabana business is customer first every time. And I use this example of we were putting up cabanas at the Turtle Bay Resort in Oahu, which is a pretty famous resort. And it was the weekend of the NFL Combine. And they wanted to get these cabanas up before the NFL Combine came to town. And our designer happened to be at his wedding weekend in India. And we were having a difficult time getting those up. And there were a couple questions that we had that we needed to ask the designer. Should we, do it this way? Can we try it this way? That type of thing. And remember, everything we did was custom. So other companies would say, oh, well, the designer's on his wedding weekend. You can't call him. And they wouldn't have had the cabanas up for the NFL weekend. But what we believed was that customer first every single time, whatever it takes. And so we pulled him out of some of his wedding festivities and asked him to FaceTime with us in order for us to help understand what we could do differently. So that way they can have the product that they ordered when they wanted it. Okay. And I think that value translated through a lot of what we did, is just taking care of the customer, doing the right thing, understanding that they have a business too and they have somebody that they're answering to as well. And that we need to make sure that that's taken care of. And that's the same way I work with my EOS clients as well.
I think to some people listening, they may be like, whoa, that's a breach of work life balance and this and that. But to me, what that sounds like is, if I'm that person who FaceTime during the wedding ceremony, I know that I obtained what good looks like, right?
Exactly.
There's clarity of like not just job security from a scarcity mindset. It's just like I feel so much better about returning that wedding, knowing that I got to step up to the plate, took care of the customers, my team and the customer rely on me. I delivered, and I'm going to assume that wedding experience was way cooler for him after he delivered.
Probably. I never thought of it that way. Probably. I never
Because
thought.
the other end of it, which I think is the opposite of authentic, is when people say, our employees come first, and like you said before, the customer can wait, and oh well, we missed the NFL Combine because they're on vacation, and that person could come back from that wedding and been like, oh, it's really quiet, and then get sneaky fired, right? Because there could be potentially some hurt feelings and
Right.
financial incentive, and that would have sucked for everyone. It would have been terrible for the customer. Would have hurt the person having to let go of that person. Obviously, that person had a great experience at the wedding, comes back down, drugs pulled. So I love that logic because people don't talk about it enough.
I think, if you're like me, you just want your business taken care of, and you want it taken care of in a way that is exceeds expectations, or at least meets expectations. And I think that when you do that, price becomes secondary. And I try to always explain that in our business, but price becomes secondary. And we had people, yeah, were there people that could have done the little awning company in Pennsylvania? Could they have done the Panda Express in Harrisburg cheaper than me? Absolutely. But when Panda Express contracted with me, they knew that I was going to meet the date, that the product was going to have a certain standard look to it and that they weren't going to have to think about it. One less hassle that they had. They have, when you're thinking about the person who runs the restaurant at Panda Express, they're dealing with air conditioners and toilets and stoves and all sorts of stuff. Anything that they could take off their plate to make it a more seamless experience for them and for the restaurant itself and the unit is great. And that's what the service that we provided to them. We were providing them with an experience.
You mentioned in the process, the interview process, talking about core values. It's a two-way street though. And I think for a good consultant, it should be like you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you.
Right.
Are there times where you've met with prospects as EOS and you're just like not going to be a fit? And
Yep.
if so, what were some of the triggers?
People that weren't open to change. Hey, we're going to do the accountability chart, but let me tell you something, Michael. On the accountability chart, this you can't touch this, you can't touch this, we can't do this, we can't do that. Why am I in here? You already made the decision, you know?
Yeah.
Or, hey, Michael, we're not going to do the level 10 meetings. Those are stupid. Well, wait a second. You're bringing me in to teach you the tools, and you're already telling me which tools you don't want to use. So you don't really want to know the right tools to use. You just want to go through certain motions, and it's not going to work. And I know it's not going to work. And so I'd rather say it on the way in. This is not going to be a situation that works rather than going in there and try to promise them something that they're not going to be able to get.
Well, just like in business buying, there's price and terms. And it seems like they want your value on their terms. And
Exactly.
to you, you're just like, look, that's a dead deal.
Exactly. And look,
Interesting.
I'm lucky I had a successful exit. I'm able to be a little bit more picky about my clients that not everybody's able to, but I think that it's important that you find that match.
At the same time, though, I feel like people may never get to the point of a successful exit unless they become picky on their clients. And
Sure.
I think that's something that's at first a very difficult, scary, fearful thing. And then once you've had experiences like yourself, Michael, it's like a no brainer. It's like, why didn't I do this sooner? I've seen that repeatedly as well. Interesting. I love when you said when you exceed expectations, price becomes secondary. I think there's also, you've done a master class on negotiation just so far in the 30 minutes or so we've been talking, where you're like, look, I might not have the best GPA or SATs, but guess what? I've got 30 great qualified references. Like, here's what I got. You might have not landed the initial deal in acquisitions. You probably got a better deal anyway afterwards. So you've really done a master class, at least in the 30 minutes, of just saying, look, when you negotiate, you should never negotiate against yourself. That's one of the things I'm hearing from you. And it's like knowing the value and standing firm to the value. So, what do you have in terms of advice on how to get people to identify or become cognizant of the value they bring to the table so they don't shortchange or undersell or overpromise, underdeliver, right? How do you like quantify the value?
Yeah, I think people really need to think to themselves, can I do what I'm promising to do? And I think that it starts in their personal lives, right? It starts with you when you say you're going to show up and pick up your kid from soccer practice at X time, that you're there at X time. And I think that starting to have that what's the word I'm looking for? Having that feeling across everything that you do is going to translate into business. And instead of just being the one more cog in the wheel, you take ownership and you take pride in what you're doing. And you say, I'm going to be the guy who's on time every single time at soccer practice. I'm going to teach that to my kids. I'm going to make sure that my clients are so happy with their poolside cabanas that they don't even think about going elsewhere. I'm going to make sure that my fill in the blank product is the best product that can possibly be out there for this client. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm following up with them, that they're happy, that they've gotten what they wanted, that type of thing.
It comes back to core values too, right? Where
Right.
it's like they're not invented, but they're uncovered or unveiled or discovered.
Exactly. Exactly.
And when you have when you can tell stories of instances, like you said, like if punctuality is a core value of yours, Michael, you can say, oh, I've done it this time, this time, this time. I love the phrase from Alex Ramosi that confidence is simply building an undeniable stack of evidence that you are who you say you are. And I think that really applies to core values in business too. And like that And anyway, what you're saying really rings true to me there. Because on the other side of the coin, going on these values is I've seen people overpromise and deliver, like just deliver and meet. And maybe the client, because they kept stacking on promises and stretching, said, "All right, you've delivered. Now we're going to keep adding to it." And maybe the service provider has said, "This is becoming so out of scope that it's not. I'm like losing my pants, or I have frustrated employees, or margins are too thin." What do you say to that person that tries too hard to be a people pleaser?
Have to know your limitations. Look, we did it. I think of an example of a cabana that we built where we decided that we were going to have hydraulic windows. And I always tell my clients there's a difference between pushing yourself a little bit out of the comfort zone and going totally out of what you're good at and disappointing the client. And I think it's important that you find that balance and know where that line is. We had no business building that cabana with hydraulic windows. We did it and it was a total disaster. Okay. It was a total disaster. And I think that was an example of us pushing ourselves too far. And so I think that what we really need to do when we're talking about, well, what is our core focus? Let's make decisions around our core focus. It doesn't mean we can't be opportunistic, but we need to make sure that we're opportunistic within the box that we should be living in. Okay.
That's such an interesting frame too, because you essentially learn that through a limit test.
Right.
Right. So it's again why it's important to try a lot of things and put yourself out there so that you can understand with more confidence what your limit is,
Exactly.
versus someone that's untested may have a Dunning Kruger effect and like, I don't know what my limit is, and then make promises or talk a talk that they haven't walked necessarily. What are some of the ways that you uniquely help entrepreneurs thrive?
Well, I'm very involved. Are you familiar with the organization EO, Entrepreneur Organization?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's a peer group where all members are entrepreneurs and business owners. And we're the largest entrepreneur run nonprofit in the world, 18,000 members across the internationally across the world. And I'm extremely involved in the LA chapter. I am the incoming president. I take over in about a month. And so part of what I do is help business owners get more of what they want out of their business. And I do that by helping to put on events. This year, we put on a great event where we had John Mackey, who was the former CEO of Whole Foods, come and speak about his experiences running Whole Foods and those types of people and those types of experiences that teach entrepreneurs things. I'm also involved or was involved in the USC entrepreneur program and helped mentor students and people that were trying to get their businesses off the ground. What are the things that they need to learn? What are the things that they need to do in order to make their business successful?
So part of it is giving back, really. I
Yeah,
mean, the nonprofit part of it, you're blessed to have made the exit, but no one's forcing you to sit in the president's seat of a nonprofit. No one's forcing you to be involved with the USC's entrepreneur program, but that's just kind of who you are.
it's who I am. And I look at it this way too. These are places that gave me so much, right? Like the EO gave me the assistance to learn about EOS, to try EOS in my business. That's where I first found out about EOS. Without that, my business might not have been successful. They're the people that helped me sell my business. I met the people who bought my business through EO. So all of these things that have happened in my life, I look back and I say, well, how did I become so successful doing these things? Well, because people helped me along the way. I need to give back and help other people who are on a similar journey in the ways that I can.
That's the first time I've heard that idea. I've heard of people giving back and obviously having a heart for service, that kind of thing. But the frame of really reflecting and taking clarity break and saying, who have been the people that have helped me get to where I'm at? And then how can I be one of those people? That's kind of
Right.
what you did.
Exactly.
And I think if everyone did that, it would be it would be a better place.
I would probably tend to agree with you. Yeah.
So this is a very broad question,
Okay.
but what's one challenge that if you solved, you think can make the most significant impact? Whether that's your personal life, the world, micro, macro, doesn't matter.
Challenge for a business, are you saying? Or
Yeah, that works.
again, I think that if people could get the right people in the right seats by building that intentional culture within their business. And what does an intentional culture look like? That looks like a culture of accountability. It looks like a culture of service to our clients and service to our customers. If we could get that in businesses, the whole world would change. Think about what your experience is like when you go to CVS to pick up a medication. Most of the time, it's absolutely miserable, unless you have the best CVS in the world. But okay, most of the time, picking up a medication at CVS is miserable, and we need to look at that experience and say, what can we do to have a better experience at CVS, at McDonald's, wherever it is, so that way people are actually enjoying life more rather than sitting there and being miserable in these, oh, well, I'm going to get through a miserable plane ride. You just got off a plane yesterday. I'm going to get through a miserable plane ride to have a good vacation. Well, the plane ride doesn't have to be miserable. And we could do things in service and in experience to have a great plane ride so that when you get off the plane in Cancun, you're already feeling good about yourself. Okay, you're feeling in vacation mode. And so I think that if we could solve those issues, so you have a lateral experience across the whole thing, it would really change the way the world operates.
What are some of the ways that EOS has changed and helped you? I know we talked about EO and EOSC a little bit, but I mean, like your role now within EOS is really living out that passion to help other entrepreneurs to have live the EOS life. But what are some of the ways that EOS specifically helped you?
Well, I could talk about in our own business, doing things like this is a great example, but we obviously were making fabric and metal products. So before we did EOS, we didn't have any mechanism of checking to see how good our sewers were. Okay. We had all these sewers, and some of them had been with us 20 years at our business or whatever. And you start to get that feeling like they've been with us 20 years. They must be great, right? They're still here and every year, but we have really no way of knowing that they're great. And so all of a sudden, when we started tracking, I tell this story because I think it's such an effective, important story to tell. We started tracking. We found out one of our sewers who had been there for 20 years was having 40% of her stuff rejected out of QC, but we had never tracked it. We didn't know. We thought she was the best. And yeah, it's true. And so when we were able to actually see that and know what was going on, we're able to ask her, do we need to get you more training? Do we need to? And she said, so this was so apropos. She said, I wanted to retire for the last 5 years. I haven't felt up to it, but I didn't know how to tell you guys this. So just by us, I like to say what EOS does so well is it turns the lights on at sometimes. And all of a sudden, things that were in the dark are now illuminated, and we're able to have a conversation that we weren't able to have before. And that's so effective and so important.
That's really what it comes down to when you talk
Yes.
about making sure people are rowing in the same direction. It's like if you don't ask or identify or track, what is someone's goal, right? Their own personal BHAG goal or what their own personal, feelings are. If you don't ask, they probably won't tell you. 9 times out of 10, they probably won't tell you.
Right.
But EOS gives us tools to help not just the leadership team and the shareholders, stakeholders, but the whole organization to be open and honest and really get what they want out of life too. Because sometimes, sort of like your missed business acquisition, it's like you might be the right person, but it could be the entirely wrong boat even.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, that's a really powerful frame on how to
And it's
solve
so important
problems.
to have those open conversations so you understand what people's skills are. I tell this another story. We, after doing EOS, starting EOS, we had, conversations. We looked at these 4 quadrants that Stephen Covey has. What do you like and you're great at? What do you like? You've seen that before. And the head of our welding department said, oh, I like doing accounting. We're like, what? Where did that come from?
Huh?
Right? Okay. You go like, what are you doing? You like doing accounting. And it came out that he used to be an accountant in Guatemala for 15 years. But we had no way of knowing that or having that conversation, yeah, with him before. And so he said, oh, if you ever need help on the weekends, with running numbers, I could come in and help you guys. It was like all of a sudden we had now a new asset in our arsenal. And so just having these open and honest conversations, you learn so many things that you wouldn't have known otherwise.
Talk about right person moving to the right seat, huh?
Right. I mean, he was also a great welder, so we didn't lose him there, but we still had other places that we could put him.
Man. What at the end of the day, I want to say whether you're 80 or 90, 100, who knows how long we're going to live when we decide that our time is called to retire or whatnot. But what do you hope a conversation with that person at the end of the day looks like? Like, how would you like that to go? What would you tell yourself if you were that person, or what would you ask them?
Let me get more clarity. You're saying for myself, understanding who I am.
Yeah, like what is one thing that you would like to, ask yourself if you were at the end of the day where all your life is lived behind you?
Did you do enough to help others?
Mm.
Did you do enough to be there for your family, for your friends, for your clients, for everybody to help them achieve what they wanted to achieve?
And what advice?
That's really the lasting impact that we have on people, right?
Yeah, the impact you make on others.
It's the impact you make on others. I was thinking about that. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I was thinking, the impact that I can make on my kids for future generations is something that is hard to measure, but is something that can change the trajectory of so many people's lives, both positively and frankly negatively. And so it's how do I look back in God willing 80 years, but how do I look back in however many years and really measure how I did in terms of helping people and helping them achieve what they want to achieve?
It's an interesting frame for you specifically because you look back at your great grandfather and knowing the story of entrepreneurship, really see the dividends and the secondary and tertiary effects of what he's done. And it sounds like you probably want to continue that sort of legacy. If there was 8 generations of Richmond entrepreneurs, you would have been probably pretty proud to have played that part.
Yeah, that would be very cool. But even if my kids tell me, hey, I don't want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be, a zoologist, whatever they want to do, I want to help them achieve what their dreams are, what's going to make them happy.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons I'm hearing from you, Michael, is that it's not so much what you do, it's how you do it, right? You could, whether you're delivering milk or liquor, whether you're doing awnings or doing EOS sessions, it's like what is the impact that you're making on others, and are you
Right.
putting them first, and are you ensuring that they hit their goals? And I think as long as you have those core values, like you mentioned, really the delivery mechanism could be personal choice, whether you're a welder or an accountant, right? That's cool. Well, Michael, my last this is a new thing that I'm doing, so bear with me. And it's a fun question that I have stolen from another podcast. And that question goes, so first I'm going to ask you if you could ask my next guest a single question, what would you ask?
Not knowing who your next guest was.
Nope, completely random. Just assume they're an EOS implementer.
Okay. What are you doing today that's going to change somebody's life trajectory tomorrow?
Love that question. Now I'm going to flip it. My last guest asked you, what would you like to have accomplished in 10 years? What does done look like? What does being a good implementer look like to you?
Being a good implementer looks like to me that I could point to companies and they can say, our company is better because of the work that you've done, and that we are in a better position to achieve our goals, both individually and as an organization, because of the work that you have done.
Love it. All we can really ask for at the end of the day is to make the world a little bit of a better place when we leave it as opposed to when we started. This last question is not deep or philosophical at all, Michael. It's where can people find you? How can they get in touch? Learn more.
Yeah, my website is Michael, Michael, Richman, Richman .me.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the thought provoking conversation. Love sharing
Great.
stories with you.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, I don't ask for much, and I don't run ads in the show. Don't plan to, but I do have one ask: is if you enjoyed the show and you learned something, share it with somebody you know that could also benefit from the show. I want to be the gift that keeps on giving. These valuable brainstorms. Until next time, everyone, be well. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.